The silent betrayal, how I exposed my family's dark secrets. I never liked living at home again. At 28, it felt like I had failed. But after Dad's stroke 8 months ago, there was no other option. Mom needed the insurance for his treatment and someone had to be there during the day. So I moved back in, trying my best to adapt. But there was always something off. Mom was always working, so it was just me and Dad at the house most of the time. My sister Carla and her husband Julian came by, but it was rare. Maybe once every few weeks. So when I heard hushed voices coming from the kitchen at 2 a.m., I froze. I was up for water like I always did late at night when I noticed the faint glow of the kitchen light spilling out from under the door. I stopped in my tracks, the glass still in my hand, and listened. "The market's perfect right now," Julian's voice, low but sharp, cut through the silence. "We just need to convince them it's the best thing," Carla replied, sounding strangely calm. "And Ethan, he's the problem." I stayed frozen, heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know what to make of it. Why was Carla talking like that about me? And why was she whispering about convincing Mom and Dad of something? My mind raced as I tried to process it. "You know how they are," Carla continued. "Dad's always had a soft spot for him. He's always been Dad's favorite." I clenched my fist around the glass, my knuckles turning white. My sister had always been manipulative, but this was different. I could feel the weight of their words pressing down on me like a storm was brewing in the quiet of the house. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, unsure if I should speak up or walk away. But then Julian's voice dropped even lower, barely above a whisper. "We just need to make sure Ethan doesn't get in the way." The tension in my chest tightened like a vice. I never liked the way Carla and Julian acted when they visited, always so polished, always so perfect. But now I could hear it, the cracks in their veneer. There was something they were hiding, something they didn't want me to know. I turned slowly, my thoughts swirling. Maybe it was nothing, maybe I was just paranoid. But something told me this wasn't just a passing conversation. I had to find out what was going on. Something in my gut told me my suspicions were just the beginning of a much darker story. The next morning, Carla arrived with that same fake smile plastered on her face. She sat down at the kitchen table, her eyes flicking briefly to me before turning to Mom and Dad. "So, we've got some news," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "Julian and I have decided to sell our house." She paused as if waiting for some kind of applause. "We're going to move in here for a while, just to help out with Dad's care. Temporarily, of course." Mom's hands froze midair as she was flipping pancakes. She looked at Carla with wide eyes. "Selling? But you love that house." I could hear the concern in Mom's voice, but Carla didn't even blink. "Well, with everything going on," Julian interjected smoothly, his smile tight, "we've been thinking about family a lot lately. About being closer. Especially with Dad's condition." I caught Dad's gaze from across the room. His speech was still a bit slurred, but his eyes were sharp as ever. There was something flickering in his expression, something that didn't sit right with me. "That sounds generous," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral even though a sick feeling had started to churn in my stomach. "Oh, it's nothing," Carla continued, her voice dripping with sweetness. "We'll help out with everything. The rent here would be less than what we're paying now. Plus, we can contribute to the household expenses." She glanced at me as she spoke, almost as if her words were meant for me specifically. That's when I noticed Julian's eyes dart to me just for a second, but enough to make my blood run cold. "Sebastian's room would be perfect for us," Carla added. "He can work from anywhere, right?" My stomach twisted. Sebastian, that was me. Of course, they didn't see me as anything other than a burden. A mere inconvenience in the perfect life they'd built. I glanced at my dad, but he was staring at his plate, barely able to follow the conversation. His mind had been clouded by the stroke, but something about all this felt wrong. I had a sinking feeling that their plan had nothing to do with helping us. "Sebastian's been here, taking care of your father," Mom said, her voice slow, careful. "Every day. We're so grateful." "Oh, of course," Julian said, his voice smooth as silk. "But let's be practical here. 2 able-bodied adults would be more helpful than just one. Plus, we could contribute in ways that Ethan can't." I froze. I could feel my face heat with anger, but I said nothing. I couldn't. They were all pretending, as if I wasn't there, as if I was invisible. As if my presence, my effort didn't matter. But the worst part? It wasn't what they were saying. It was how they said it. Their words were coated in kindness, but underneath, they were laced with something darker. Something manipulative. Before I could respond, Carla's voice trilled out again, breaking the silence. "We could even help you with some of Dad's paperwork. Maybe organize things a bit more efficiently." I couldn't stand it anymore. The subtle jab, the underhanded tactics that were so neatly hidden behind those fake smiles were getting under my skin. It was becoming clearer and clearer. They didn't want to help, they wanted control. They were plotting something, and I was in their way. Before I share what happened next, the moment that left an entire room of journalists in stunned silence, I want to connect with you, my amazing viewers. Where are you watching from? Drop your country's flag in the comments below. And if you've ever had to fight for something you believe in, hit that like button, because this story is just getting started. I took a deep breath and walked out of the room, my mind racing. Carla and Julian's words echoed in my ears, spinning a web of lies and manipulation that was starting to form a terrifying picture. Something wasn't right. I could feel it in every fiber of my being. But what was their plan? What did they need from me? And more importantly, what were they hiding? This was just the beginning, and I had to be ready. It was a quiet evening when the tension finally broke. I had just finished helping Dad with his physical therapy, guiding his weak arms through the exercises he struggled with. Mom was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, humming softly to herself. The house felt like it had settled into a rhythm. For the first time in weeks, I thought maybe things were going to be okay. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. I was putting away Dad's therapy equipment when the door to the living room opened. It was Carla and Julian, standing there in the doorway like they owned the place. I hadn't even noticed them come in. They didn't announce themselves like they usually did. No, this time they just walked in, their expressions determined. "We need to talk," Carla said, her voice cold, a sharp edge to her usual sweetness. Julian stepped in behind her, his eyes hard, almost calculating. I turned to face them, trying to keep my composure. "What's going on?" "You need to step aside," Carla said, crossing her arms over her chest. Her tone was icy. "You're just a burden to this family now, Ethan." I felt the blood rush to my face. The words cut deeper than I could have expected. Burden. The word echoed in my head, reverberating through the room. It felt like the floor had been yanked out from beneath me. All the things I had done, all the care I'd given Dad over the past few months, was it all for nothing? Was that how they saw me? "You've been here long enough," Julian added, his voice smooth and calculating. "Mom and Dad need help, real help. You can't take care of them forever, and you sure as hell can't take care of their finances." I was stunned. I opened my mouth to say something, but the words caught in my throat. Burden, they saw me as a burden. Everything I'd done, everything I'd sacrificed, it didn't matter. The worst part was that they were saying it so casually, as if it was a simple fact. Like I wasn't even worth considering. I wanted to scream, to fight back. But something inside me knew that this wasn't the moment for that. Not yet. Instead, I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and turned away from them. "I'm going upstairs," I said quietly. My voice didn't sound like my own, distant, almost detached. The anger was simmering inside me, but I couldn't let it out. Not in front of them. Not yet. I walked past them and up the stairs, my footsteps heavy, each one pounding against the floor like a drumbeat. Inside, I was seething. They had crossed a line, one I couldn't ignore anymore. I was done being the invisible one in this family. But I couldn't just walk out. I had to be smart about this. I walked into my room, locked the door behind me, and began packing a bag. Clothes, essentials. Nothing too obvious, just enough to get me out of the house without making it a scene. I had to leave, but I wasn't going to just walk away like they thought I would. Before I left, though, I needed to make sure I had a way to watch what happened next. Carla and Julian weren't just going to stop at calling me a burden. They were playing a bigger game, and I wasn't about to let them win without a fight. I went to my desk and pulled out my laptop, ordering a set of small cameras. Nothing too fancy, just enough to keep an eye on things. I knew they'd try to manipulate Mom and Dad, to take what wasn't theirs, and I needed proof. The cameras were my eyes when I wasn't around. Next, I flagged Dad's accounts. My heart pounded as I navigated through the financial records. I didn't want to believe it, but the more I looked, the more I realized how deep the problem went. They were already in motion, and I needed to act fast. I couldn't let them take advantage of him, not without a fight. With everything set up, I grabbed my bag and left the house quietly. I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want them to know I was watching, but I needed them to think they'd won. Because sometimes the best way to protect your family is to let the others believe they've beaten you. As I drove away, the weight of what had just happened settled in. I wasn't going to let them destroy everything I'd fought for. They thought they could walk all over me, but they didn't know who they were dealing with. I wasn't done yet. This was just the beginning. The real fight was about to start. The days that followed were a blur of tension and unease. I rented a small apartment close to my parents' house, watching the footage from the hidden cameras every night. It was an uncomfortable ritual, but I had to know what Carla and Julian were planning. I needed to hear the truth for myself. The first night I sat down to review the footage, my heart was in my throat. The video was grainy but clear enough to make out their voices. I fast-forwarded to the first night they had been in my old room, after they thought I'd left for good. "You don't think anyone will notice?" Julian's voice was low, but the desperation was palpable. "No," Carla replied, her voice soft but confident. "We just need Dad to sign these papers and we can refinance everything. We'll get access to the equity in the house. We can pay off the debts and no one will know. It'll be like nothing happened." I leaned forward, my fingers gripping the edge of my desk. This wasn't just a scheme to take advantage of Dad's health, it was a full-on attempt to steal everything they could. I watched as they discussed forging my father's signature, the talk turning more and more sinister as they planned how to get him to sign documents he couldn't fully understand. I could feel my blood boiling, but I kept watching, determined to gather as much evidence as possible. Over the next few days, the cameras captured more of the same. Julian spent time in Dad's study, rifling through files, and Carla would casually mention, "Just get him to sign this and we're good. We can handle the rest." It was clear they had been planning this for a long time. Their facade of concern for Dad's health was just that, an act. They were after something bigger and I wasn't about to let them succeed. I took a deep breath and picked up the phone. I had a plan, but I needed help. I couldn't do this alone. The first call was to a lawyer I trusted, someone who could help me navigate the legal side of things. We discussed the situation in detail and the lawyer confirmed what I already feared. What Carla and Julian were planning wasn't just morally wrong, it was criminal. Forging signatures, attempting to defraud their own parents, this was a federal offense. The next call was to a forensic investigator, someone who specialized in financial fraud. I needed someone who could dig deep into my parents' finances and make sure nothing slipped through the cracks. The investigator agreed to help and we started working together to track down every financial transaction, every document they'd accessed. We were building a case, and the more we uncovered, the worse it got. I knew it was time to confront my parents. The truth had to come out and I couldn't protect them forever. I gathered all the evidence, the footage, the bank statements, the lawyer's advice, and prepared myself for the hardest conversation of my life. The next morning, I walked into my parents' house. Mom was in the kitchen, humming as she always did. Dad sat in his chair, quietly watching the TV. For a moment, everything felt normal, peaceful even. But I knew that wasn't the reality. The truth had to be told. "Mom, Dad, I need to talk to you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. They both turned toward me, surprised. "What's wrong, honey?" Mom asked, concern lining her face. I sat down at the table, my heart pounding. This wasn't easy, but it had to be done. "I found something. Something I need to show you." I slid the laptop toward them, clicking play on the footage I had gathered. The room fell silent as the video played. Julian and Carla's voices filled the room, each word, each plan laid out in chilling detail. The shock on my parents' faces was immediate. Mom's eyes widened in disbelief. Dad's hands trembled as he watched his own children betray him. I can't believe this," Mom whispered, her voice shaking. They were going to steal from us?" "They've been planning this for a while," I said quietly. "They wanted to get control of everything, our house, your retirement, your assets." "I had to do something, Mom," I added, the weight of the words hitting me like a punch. "I've already taken steps to protect everything. The bank accounts are flagged. I've contacted a lawyer and we've started the process of making sure no one can access your finances without your permission. This ends now." The room was still except for the soft hum of the refrigerator in the background. Dad's gaze was fixed on the screen, his expression hardening as the video continued. The betrayal was clear in his eyes, but so was the gratitude. I could see it in the way he looked at me, relief mixed with a deep sadness. I didn't expect them to react with anger. They were too shocked, too stunned to do anything but absorb the weight of what had been revealed. But in the pit of my stomach, I felt something shift. I wasn't just protecting them anymore, I was taking back control of my family's future. The immediate threat was neutralized, but the battle wasn't over. Carla and Julian hadn't realized it yet, but I was ready. I had everything I needed to make sure they paid for what they'd done. They thought they were in control, but now the tables had turned. I had the evidence, the law on my side, and the strength of knowing I was doing the right thing. This was just the beginning. The day of reckoning arrived sooner than I expected. After everything that had happened, after all the planning and the waiting, it was time to face Carla and Julian. I called a family meeting, one that I knew would shatter everything they built. They had no idea what was coming. I'd arranged everything carefully. I knew exactly how to expose them without giving them the chance to twist the story. Mom and Dad sat on the couch, both of them looking bewildered but determined. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on all of us. This wasn't just about the money. It was about betrayal, about trust. The foundation of our family was cracked, and it was time to rebuild. Carla and Julian walked in, as polished and put together as always. Carla's smile faltered when she saw the atmosphere in the room, tense, heavy. Julian's usual calm demeanor shifted into something more defensive. They didn't know it yet, but the game was over. "Sit down," I said, my voice steady. I could see the uncertainty in their eyes. They'd been so confident, so sure that they could get away with everything. But they didn't realize that I had already won. Carla dropped her purse on the coffee table, her eyes flicking nervously to Julian. He stood by the door, arms crossed, his jaw tight. It was clear they were trying to control the situation, but it was too late for that. "What's all this about, Ethan?" Carla asked, her voice more tense than usual. "We're just trying to help out." "Oh, I know," I said, leaning forward, making sure they could see the determination in my eyes. "I know exactly what you've been up to." I clicked a button on the laptop in front of me and the video played. The footage of their whispered conversations, their planning to steal from our parents, filled the room. I watched as their faces paled as the realization hit them. They were cornered, exposed. No more pretending. "Is this what you've been planning?" I asked, my voice thick with a mix of anger and disbelief. "Trying to take everything from Mom and Dad? Forging signatures? Lying? Manipulating us all for your own gain?" Carla opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Julian's eyes darted around the room, desperate to find a way out, but there was none. The truth was laid bare, and there was no escaping it. "Ethan, you have to understand," Julian started, his voice trembling for the first time. "We were just trying to help." "No," I cut him off, my voice sharp. "You were trying to steal from your own parents. This wasn't about helping anyone. This was about greed." The silence in the room was suffocating. Mom's face was pale, her hands shaking as she looked at Carla. Dad sat back in his chair, eyes closed as if trying to process everything. The disappointment in his eyes hit harder than any accusation could. I turned back to Carla and Julian, my anger simmering just below the surface. "You thought you could do this and get away with it. But I've already taken the necessary steps. The bank accounts are protected. The fraudulent documents are flagged. I've already spoken to the authorities. This isn't just about family anymore. This is a crime." Carla looked like she might collapse. Her eyes were glassy, but there was no remorse in her expression, only fear. Julian, on the other hand, looked like he was trying to hold himself together, but it was clear he knew the walls were closing in. They had nowhere to go. "We're going to the police," I said quietly, letting the weight of those words sink in. "And then the legal process will take its course." The shock was still lingering in the room as the gravity of what was happening set in. For a moment, there was only silence. Then Carla spoke, her voice weak. "We didn't mean for it to get this far," she said, but the words didn't carry the weight of sincerity. She was trying to play the victim now, but it wasn't going to work. Not after everything she'd done. "It doesn't matter now," I said, my voice steady but firm. "The damage is done. You betrayed us all." And just like that, the false facade they'd built around themselves crumbled. Carla and Julian's world, the one they'd worked so hard to manipulate, collapsed in front of them. It wasn't a swift collapse. It was slow, methodical, the way I had planned it. After the meeting, as Carla and Julian left the house under the pressure of their looming legal consequences, I sat down next to Mom and Dad. There were no words to say. None that would make everything right. But in that silence, I could feel something shift. Trust was broken, but it was also rebuilt in a way. I had protected them. I had done what needed to be done. And for the first time in months, I felt a sense of relief, of justice. Mom squeezed my hand, her eyes red. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking. I didn't know they could do something like this." I nodded, my own throat tight with emotion. "It's over now. You're safe." But the truth lingered in the air. Carla and Julian's actions had left a scar on this family, one that would take time to heal. Their greed had caused pain, but it had also brought us closer. In the end, justice had been served, and the trust that had been torn apart was slowly starting to be rebuilt. As I sat with my parents, the weight of everything that had happened settled over me. I had done what needed to be done. But there was still a bitter taste in my mouth, the taste of betrayal. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew this, the quiet one in the family? Not so quiet anymore. I had fought for what was right and I had won.